Today we're going to look at 10 different factors that can increase your longevity, ranging from your mindset, ranging from how many calories you eat, all the way down to what you read and what you look at. Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead, so let's dive right into it. We're going to start off with the mindset. Research reported in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States of America reveals that those who are optimistic have an 11 to 15% higher lifespan than those who are less optimistic. So first of all, a mindset, being a person who has hope for the future and realizing that you can, even in difficult times, you can get around trials and there is hope for the future. Number two has to do with spending time in nature. Research reported in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives revealed that women who live in the greenest areas or natural areas have 12% lower all-cause mortality than those in the least natural environments. And this is interesting. Farming and Longevity. Osborne Segerberg wrote a book called Living to be 100. He looked at 1,200 people who lived to be 100 and discovered that of the 1,200, 746 had at some point worked on a farm as their full-time occupation. And that might be because, 80 years ago, most people at some point had lived on a farm. But regardless, it seems that living in nature, spending time in the peace and the quiet, it may enhance your longevity. The next one has to do with food and nutrition. What about apples? Research in the British Journal of Nutrition reports on women over the age of 70 who were followed for 15 years. They found that those who consumed greater than 100 grams a day of apple, now an average apple might be 150 to 250 grams, those who just ate over 100 grams a day had a 35% lower mortality rate than those who consumed the least amount of apples. So this is really incredible. Something as simple as eating an apple, and there are all these fantastically flavored varieties of apples. Like one of my favorite, it's called Evercrisp, and the reason it's called Evercrisp, it's a mix between Honeycrisp and Fuji, and it can last up to like a year in your refrigerator. It tastes so good, and if this enhances your longevity, why not give apples a try? So how much should we eat? A study in the Journal of Gerontology followed men for 36 years and looked at the amount of calories they consumed at baseline and at the conclusion. And they found that those who ate 15% less calories than the average person tended to live the longest. So here's the actual chart, and what they found is you can tell that once you got to like eating 500 calories a day, you were more likely to die. Now, probably the people who were eating 500 calories a day were probably dying already, and that's why they were eating so few calories. But notice the ones who ate 1,882 calories on average. It was a span from somewhere between 1,705 calories to 2,061. And evidently the ones who were eating this amount were the longest living group of people in this particular study. And so you typically hear like, the diet should be somewhere around 2,000 calories. Well, that seems to be about accurate. Somewhere there or just under is probably about the best. For most people, they would lose a significant amount of weight, and that's because Americans are eating probably over 3,000 calories a day. And so the fact is, your body would finally get used to it. You get comfortable eating that amount of calories, and it could be life-changing for you. What about flossing? A study reported in the Journal of Aging Research found that those who floss every day had a 30% lower risk of death than those who never floss. And brushing at night. The study also found that those who never brush their teeth at night increased their risk of death by 20 to 35% compared to those who do so daily. You say, Chad, do you floss your teeth daily? Almost every single day. I did it just before starting this video, and I brush almost after every single meal, unless I'm traveling or something like that, almost all the time. And the reason I do it is because my mouth just feels better when I do. Now, what to eat? And I know this is a controversial subject, but it's really, according to the research, not very controversial. Those who eat the highest quantities of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and nuts are the longest living groups of people in the world. We see this time and time again. Typically we see cultures like the Inuits who don't eat very many Fruits, vegetables, and grains are some of the shorter living people, and once again, people who eat the most end up living the longest. When you look at the blue zones, for example, the blue zones are places around the planet where people live the longest, but not only the longest, the healthiest, and they typically eat much of their diet, the majority of their diet is whole plant-based foods, and some might say, well, they probably don't eat very many carbs. Actually, they do. The average blue zone eats between 50 to upwards of 85% of their calories from carbohydrates. And historically, one of the healthiest groups of people, before anyway, was the Okinawans, and they ate nearly 85% of their diet was carbs. I mean, this is incredible. Nearly 70% of their diet, 69% of their diet historically was the sweet potato, and they were a super long living people, and not only did they live long, they kept their cognition, their mental health was still with them into their elderly years. But okay, what are other factors other than nutrition? What about love and health? Since 1938, two groups of men have been followed. One from Harvard, who graduated during World War II, then a group of poor boys from Boston. They looked at their health and their relationships. They scanned their brains and they looked at their health records. What this study, spanning more than 80 years, has found is that those who had strong relationships were happier, healthier, and had greater longevity. They discovered that it is not simply about being married, but being in a loving relationship that made the biggest impact. And love is so amazingly important. I mean, they followed these men for 80 years, and relationships were potentially one of the most important factors for longevity. It may be even more important than things like blood pressure or cholesterol. Being in a loving relationship is one of the healthiest things that you can do. This next one is going to surprise you. I'm guessing you've never heard about this one before. What about following your conscience? Multiple studies, including one in the journal Health Psychology, found that people who are more conscientious live longer than those who are not so conscientious. So following your conscience seems to be very important. They found this in young people and in older people. If you are a conscientious individual, meaning if you follow what you know to be right, if you're following your conscience, if you feel that prick of, well, this isn't right, I shouldn't do it, it's important to follow what you know to be right. But what about reading? A study of 3,635 people was reported in the journal Social Science and Medicine. These individuals were followed for 12 years, and they found that those who read books for around a half an hour a day lived on average 23 months, nearly 2 years longer than those who were not readers. They found a greater benefit to books versus magazines and newspapers. This is something that I do every day. I begin my day reading. I don't miss a day of doing that, almost ever. I mean, in the last 20 years, I've hardly missed a day doing that. And there's something so peaceful, and research has shown that specifically, that reading for simply 6 minutes. Now, this study showed for longevity, you want to have at least a half an hour, and an hour is even better. But just for reading for 6 minutes can lower the amount of stress in your life more significantly than many other factors. So reading is very important. An actual physical copy of a book has a better benefit on your mind than it does reading simply off of a screen. Multiple studies, including 2 studies in the journal Social Psychology and Personality Science, have found that people who are spiritual live anywhere from 4 to nearly 9.5 years longer than those who are less spiritual. This is fascinating. Following your conscience, reading, being spiritual are all factors that enhance longevity and also can enhance your happiness. And this reminds me, I do happen to be a Christian, this reminds me of a verse back in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6 and verse 24, where it says, "And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes." That means to follow these laws. And then it goes on to say, "For our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day." Meaning, all these commandments, like spending time reading the Word of God, spending time in spiritual experiences, following your conscience, these things together have been given, we were actually told thousands of years ago, were given for our longevity, for our good always, that it might preserve us alive as it is this day. And You know, there's nothing so sweet as going to bed with a clear conscience. Living in guilt for things you just did that day, it just saps your energy. Maybe it saps your life force, evidently. So I would challenge you to try implementing some of these things in your life. For me, I begin the day reading in the Bible. It's changed my life when I began to do that a number of years ago. Actually, I read the Bible through for the first time because an atheist challenged me. An atheist made me look like a fool for never reading the Bible through. And I'm so glad that he made me look like a fool. Because of him, I read it through for the first time. And because of him, well, because of him getting me to read that book, the Bible, it changed my life. And so, maybe that's something you could give a try. Well, if you like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications. God bless and have a fantastic day.